Hello there. Another English lesson, another Monday. I'm still a little sick, so hopefully my voice holds up for this English lesson. I'm going to try to keep it at like 15 minutes. I can't say that this is going to be all that exciting, especially if you don't like writing, but it's something I have to teach, you know. I'm a reading and a writing teacher. So today we're going to get into a little bit of grammar, maybe fix a problem that I've been seeing quite a bit, which is run on sentences. But that's not going to be the focus of this lesson. There are three focuses for this lesson. First is active versus passive voice. And the reason we're talking about this is because it can really help you with your writing. Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. The next one, also with the writing, is the importance of using verbs in the past tense. So we'll talk about that in a minute. And the final thing I just want to remind you about, hopefully I don't forget, is getting imagery into your writing, because soon, real soon, maybe you've already started. Some people have already started, but it hasn't been assigned. Some people have started on their nonfiction narrative. You've probably written several of these over the years. I think maybe starting in sixth grade. I didn't bring any water with me. I have a very old Mountain Dew here. It's probably lost all of its fizz. Oh, watch. When I open this, I bet it's going to just, not as much as I thought, but it's probably pretty flat. But I didn't realize my voice would get so rough in the first 2 minutes. So imagery, let me just remind you about that. That's going to be really quick. Imagery, think of image, think of what you see. But of course, English teachers, we have to make it more complicated. It's actually all of the five senses. So maybe you won't do this in your first draft, but when you go through and you're editing, yes, hopefully you will be editing, and you find that you could add some imagery into your writing, you might add, like most people will talk about what it looks like, but what the air smells like, what something feels like, the sounds that you might hear. A very easy way to get your writing a lot better is just sprinkle in some of those. You don't want too many at the same time. And this is something we can work on when we're workshopping these with a second or a third draft. But just keep in mind, when you start writing, include some imagery. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is this thing, the importance of putting verbs in the past tense. So when I say past tense, remember, means it's already happened. Now, there are many stories in which it takes place during like the present time. We'll talk about that like in just a second. I have a couple examples. So you don't have to put verbs in the past tense, but I just want to show you what they sound like. They have a little bit more of an impact. So I wrote a very boring sentence here. I hope none of you will write a sentence as boring as this in your writing, but it's got a subject and it's got a predicate. We'll talk about that in a minute. And it's got a period. It's got an end mark. Or you might have a period, exclamation point, question mark. Those are all important. They prevent run-on sentences. Very boring sentence, but it's in present tense. It's happening right now. The boy jumps over the ball, like right now. There was a boy, a ball, jumped over it. Present tense, jumps. Now, if you put your story in the past tense, like it's already happened, and you want to make sure that your story stays in the past tense all the way through, you don't want to change tenses. It's very easy to do. You want to keep the tense. So I wouldn't even say that I'm encouraging you to write in the past tense. I just want you to see how verbs sound, at least most verbs in English, unless they're irregular. We use an ed at the end to say that it's already happened. And that ED has a little bit more of an impact. So the boy jumped. It's got that hard DT sound at the end, which gives it a little bit more impact. So the boy jumped over the ball. As a reader is reading that, it's just a little bit more oomph, I guess, for lack of a better term. Oomph. A little more oomph. The boy jumps over the ball. The boy jumped over the ball. Just think of that when you're writing. You're going to have some decisions to make, even before you put anything down on the page. The tense, when does it take place? Obviously, who's the main character? But you're also going to want to figure out, okay, from which point of view am I telling this story? Is it going to be first person? Is the narrator and the main character going to be the same person? I did this, I did that. Or will your narrator just be the narrator? That's third person, and they are going to be telling the story. So we've talked a little bit about the advantages of each one, the disadvantages. So be thinking about that too before you, most of the time, the nonfiction narrative, it's going to be in first person because it's about you, but it's a narrative. It's not an autobiography. So with English class, you can break the rules quite a bit. So, but be on the lookout for that. Now, this is where it gets a little bit more difficult here. Passive voice versus active voice. And again, one has more impact than the other. Most writers will encourage you, or writing teachers will encourage you to use active voice. But we need to talk about the difference. What's the difference between active voice and passive voice? And to do that, we need to talk a little grammar here. So each sentence that you write should have a subject. Maybe you've heard this before. And it should have a predicate. So let's talk about what is a subject. Subject is basically somebody doing something or something doing something. Okay. So in this last sentence here, very simple, the boy jumps over the ball. What is doing the action? It's the boy. The boy is the subject. And then the predicate is the verb. You'll hear both terms, the predicate or the verb. And that's the thing that's being done. The verb, remember, is something that you do. So in the sentence, jumps or jumped. What's happening? Jumps. All right, so in that sentence, we have the boy is the subject, jumps is the predicate or the verb, same thing. And then don't worry about over the ball, it's a prepositional phrase. But that's your basic sentence. It has a subject, has a predicate. It might have something at the end. And for each of those, you want, at the very least, maybe a comma at the end. If you're going to connect it, that's coming. Maybe the next lesson is going to be on run-on sentences, because I see even like some of our best writers in class with too many run-on sentences. Guess what? That's very common in middle school. Don't feel bad. That's something we're going to be working on over the year. All right. I want to incorporate a little violence, right? In storytelling, usually that's one of the things that really captures people's attention. We don't want too much violence. We don't need all the blood. This is still middle school, but a little bit of violence here might get the reader. They might get their energy a little perked up there. Like, well, wait, what? Should I keep reading? We like that, right? So here's something in the active voice. It's where the subject is doing the action. The killer stabbed his victim. That's usually a guy that stabs, right? It's usually guys are worse, aren't they? Usually they're the killers. So subject is doing the action. The killer stabbed his victim. It's a little bit more powerful. That's active voice. You may be wondering, well, what's passive voice? That's when the subject is not doing the action, or it's having the action done to it. Okay. So in this case, his victim was stabbed by the killer. It doesn't have as much impact. So his victim there is the subject. It's the thing, and it's having something done to it though. So that's passive voice. If you stick to having the subject doing the action, it's going to be more impactful. It's going to be usually fewer words. See, his victim was stabbed by the killer. The killer stabbed his victim. It's a little more succinct. It's a little shorter, gets right to the point. So you definitely want to write mostly, if not always, an active voice. Again, this is English class. Rules can be broken every so often. If you switch it up and write a sentence in passive voice, it could be effective. But you want to stick with mostly active voice. Let's take a look at some of these really quickly here on a website. Active voice versus passive voice here. In most English sentences with an action verb, the subject performs the action denoted by the verb. These examples right here show that the subject is doing the verb's action. The man must have eaten 5 hamburgers. The man is doing the action. He is the subject. He's eating burgers. But if you look down here, it's the same sentence, but it's in the passive voice. It's a little clunkier. It doesn't have as much impact. 5 hamburgers must have been eaten by the man. So you have the subject, the hamburgers, and the action is being done to them. And not quite as powerful, in my opinion. Marilyn mailed the letter. I mean, not a great sentence. I mean, it's not very impactful, but in passive voice, the subject, the thing at the beginning, the thing, is having the action done to it. So the letter was mailed by Maryland. Maryland, not the state, Maryland. And this one is really weird right here. They don't even have an example of it, but I'll try to put it in passive voice. But some of these sentences, I don't think you would ever write it in passive voice just because it doesn't make sense. But colorful parrots, that's the subject. What are they doing? They're living where? In the rainforest. So colorful parrots live in the rainforest. I don't even know how you would put that in passive voice, but you would have to have the rainforest as the subject. So the rainforest is the place in which the colorful parrots live, something like that. So in that case, I mean, like passive voice really doesn't even make sense. It's way too wordy. And I don't think most people would choose that anyway, but you want to make sure in active voice, stick to that. And that is where your subject does the action to something else. All right. I'm going to be around. The class has probably got what, maybe 10 more minutes. So no new assignment today. That's the good news. No new assignment today. The assignment was to watch this video. Hope you're still awake. Hope I haven't put you to sleep. But the rest of the time can be used for working on anything that you might have to do. Maybe that vocabulary quiz from last week, number 3. No new words yet. We'll get number 4 out at some point this week. No rush. Today was about learning about active voice, passive voice, the importance of using your past tense verbs, a little bit of imagery. All right. Use the rest of the time in this class wisely, please.